Hi again, Nick Cortez here with Creation Army TV. This is part 2 of what I want to talk about, which is art brushes. So in my last video I covered how to create and replace art brushes to control artwork which follows any complex line that you draw. And in this video we'll talk about how to control size. So in my last video you saw me draw this, and then I quickly drew a line. I'll do it right here with the pencil tool, and I'll apply to the stroke, I will apply this brush. And you'll notice that they're relatively the same size, they're the same width in other words. So how do we control that? I mean, I might want to make this, larger or smaller, or much smaller, like maybe 0.2. And what's going on? Why is this all squashed? So let's figure out what's happening here. I'm going to delete this, and let's go over to my other artboard. So here's what's happening. I'm going to turn this layer off. So in terms of sizing, here's what happens with art brushes. On the left here, I've got this black star, and if I drag this black star into my brush palette, I did already. I'll delete this and I'll start over. I'll remove. If I drag this black star, which is 50 points high, into my brush palette and create an art brush out of it, name it star line, here's what's going to happen. When I create my line, and I'll go left to right, when I create my line and apply the brush star line, this is also 50 points in height. It's the same as its parent, basically. You can consider this original artwork its parent. This artwork, even though it's a 1-point stroke, is 50 points high. So there's a bit of a disparity there that you have to be aware of when making art brushes. So to carefully control size, in other words, if I wanted a 1-point star line to be actually 1 point tall, there's nothing that I can do in the brushes palette to control that. What you have to actually realize is that a 1-point line is coming out to equal a 100% size of the original object. So if your original object is 50 points, you make it an art brush, and you draw a line that's 1 point with that art brush, this will appear to be 50 points high. So it's pretty straightforward. 1 point equals 100% of the original parent artwork. Also, I'll show this layer. If you reduce the point size of this line to 0.5, you'll get 50% size. I'll do that right now, and I'll hit 0.5 into the, I'm typing that into the stroke panel, and I'll hit enter. Now this star line is actually 25 points high. It's half of the original. On the other side of that, if you go up to a 2-point line, you'll go up to 200% size of the original object, meaning this will become 100 points tall. And I'll enter a 2 into that panel. And now if I measure that with my measurement tool, now we can see from the info panel here that it's 100 points tall. It's twice of the original. So keep that in mind when you're making art brushes, because you might come up with some really wacky sizes that seem to be out of your control. And we don't want things to be out of our control in Illustrator. Our artwork is always better and more efficient when things are in our control. So I'll scroll down a little bit here. I'll hide this artwork. So what I like to do to carefully control my brush size is I like to make my original object, sorry, all this up and down. I like to make my original object a decent size, or basically a small size, so that when I change its size later with the stroke panel, I will be carefully controlling the size of the object. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to scroll down here, and there's you can see a tiny black spot. I'll zoom in because this is how I like to work. I like to make my original object, zoom in a couple of times. I like to make my original object actually 1 point high. And you can see it goes left to right, like I talked about in my last video. So my start is on the left and my finish is on the right. And this tiny black triangle in the transform palette, you can see that it's 1 point high. That means that when I make an art brush out of it by hitting new art brush, I'll name it 1 point wedge, and hit OK. Now, when you make an art brush and use the art brush, now this line here is 1 point in the stroke panel, and it's actually sort of physically 1 point high, even though the height panel says 0 because it's only registering the spine of the stroke. But if I increase this stroke value to 2, then I'm doing a 200% of the original artwork, and it's actually physically 2 points in height. And you can see this artwork start to finish applied to some other nice curvy lines. And this looks like the hair example that I was talking about in my last video somewhat. I can apply this nice wedge along a spiral or along a square, and it starts and ends in these areas here. So what you come up with when you do a 1 point high, or basically a small piece of artwork put into the brushes panel, gives you a good amount of control over exactly how high these are. So if I dial in, let's say 6 for my stroke, I know that this is now 6 points high. And a few of you may be more familiar with Illustrator, and you may know that Illustrator, I think since CS4, now lets you actually edit the width of your normal stroke lines with no art brushes to achieve this exact wedge. So you might be yelling at your screens right now going, why are you bothering making these triangle wedges when you can just do it with a regular stroke? I'll demonstrate. I'll draw a pen line that goes from here to here, and I'll switch the stroke. There we go. So now I just have a black stroke that is thick. And I want to achieve this, but I don't have to do it with an art brush. All I have to do is pull out my stroke width tool, which is right here. Again, this was a new addition, I believe, in CS4. And then I'll hover over the end. You can see the little white dot. I'll hover over the end of this line and actually just kind of, pull it to a point. And now I have my controllable wedge without using the brushes palette. I know that, but I learned this method years before this tool was even available, and there were lots of instances where especially when I was drawing portraits, where I had to draw strands of hair and I needed a line that would taper to a fine point, or I needed several lines put together, and I'll show you that in this quick example. I'll take this 1 point triangle, you can extend it as long as you want, and I'll make maybe a couple of duplicates. One of them I'll make randomly longer. I'll take this one and I'll stretch it as well. I might shift this down and I might shift this one out. Now I have a bunch of triangles that are just sort of all tapering out and finishing this way. And without grouping or without doing anything to these, you can make these 4 objects a new art brush. There we go. And I'll just call this hair 1. And now these 4 objects can be applied to a line that you draw. And there you go. Now you have your 4 objects. So you can't do this with your standard width selection tool. You can only achieve this sort of streaky look with art brushes. And imagine, like, on this side you've got a you've got a speeding baseball or something like that. And I'll just quickly, here's our baseball over on this side, and you know, and it's got these, you know, it's streaking through the air. So art brushes can give you this kind of cool cartoony, you know, speed lines, or this can be like I said, this can be a hair on a character. You can do a lot with art brushes, and the takeaway from this video is how to carefully control the size of your original artwork so that your art brushes are true to size in your stroke panel. Okay, so that does it for this video on sizing of your art brushes. And in my next video, I will talk about how you can control the color of your art brushes to make some pretty interesting looking artwork. Thanks for watching. I'm Nick with Creation Army TV. I'll see you in the next video.